All right. Boy, I could use some walk-up music, huh? Maybe we'll work on that next. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, after a huge day of spring games. So today, April 13th, and then also looking forward to April 20th. It's just almost impossible to track and watch and cover all these games, but we're having a heck of a time doing just that. A few minutes ago, released our Michigan State recap on the spring game from Spartan Field. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is your place for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis of the game you love, I love, we love. We're hardcore college football fans through and through. So this is your place to lock in for college football analysis. So yes, I just took in Michigan State football and released a video on Michigan State's efforts to fix what was a sputtering Spartan offense in 2018, number 116 in the nation, total offense, number 126 in scoring. I'm going to check on the live chat, and we'll get going right here. I had a couple requests to go live. So here I am, and it's going to be all up to you to talk to me because I've got nothing prepared other than all the games that I've got on DVR today from Alabama, Auburn, Penn State, Nebraska, and others to evaluate the spring games and provide those recaps. Tomorrow, Sunday, I have a recording session scheduled with Tony Gerdeman from the ozone.net on Ohio State, the Mazada podcast, reviewing Missouri football, and I'll check out the Missouri football game today. We also have Vernon Speaks Sports from Auburn to check out the Auburn Tigers. We just had him on last night to preview the game, and now that he's got a chance to see the Auburn A-Day game, to review what happened on the Plains, and then Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama on the Crimson Tide. So I will have at the very least 4 videos of spring game recaps available for you on Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening. Let's strike up the live chat. And I'll let you know that, of course, we've got the call-in number ready to roll, 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. And on Monday, I've got scheduled Shyler Callahan from Dub V Nation on West Virginia's spring game, and also Texas Talk with Andrew Miller from Hook'em Headlines. Patreon, check us out on Patreon. And for those 4 or 5 people that are locked in on Patreon, I promise I must deliver more content, and maybe that's going to be a live stream sometime tomorrow, maybe late tonight. I'll provide some content and some value there at Patreon because that's just another revenue stream that is going to keep us going here, eventually going to be the difference, I'm sure, whether it's Patreon, whether it's here at YouTube, whether it's the Super Chat that we've got available right here. All these different revenue streams have to come into play to keep the content coming. All right. Here we go. My guess is this is Deep Barat. He was the first of 2 to suggest the live stream tonight. All right, so it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Brian Rockwell calling you again, brother.
I was completely wrong. It's Brian on the line. Brian, how you doing tonight?
Fooled you again, brother.
Well, we had two people that actually, I hate to cut you off, but we had 2 people that requested the live stream, so I jumped on late here and did the live stream, so I thought it would be one of those 2 people calling. But Brian, I appreciate the phone call.
No problem, brother. Hey, usually I call you, bombard you about what Pitt did with that. I can't remember his name now. The transfer from Illinois. I can't remember.
Okay.
Jeff.
You're talking about Jeff George.
It doesn't matter. He's probably graduated now. Now it don't matter. So, but I am calling. I want your honest opinion, my man. Here we go. USC's football coach, man. How big of a leash are they going to give him, man? What do you think? Week 4 after 3 losses, he's done?
How much of a leash will they give them, or how much of a leash would I give them?
Well, I mean, honestly, come on. Everybody knows how this is going to end.
Pretty much. Well,
yeah.
They still have the best talent in the division, so if they can win a division title, he may save himself. They could go, let's say, Brian, they could go 6-3 in the Pac-12, and that would be good enough to win that division as it was last year with Utah. They get to the Pac-12 championship game, and they're like 8-4, and I don't know that they're going to fire him coming off a Pac-12 championship game. I don't know.
In addition to the leash, and in addition to the leash that's very, very, very short one, I'm sure. What are the prospects that Lynn Swann is out with him? And I'll let you go, man. You have a great. I love your show on YouTube. You're the man.
Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate it. Thanks for the support. So that's a great question, not just on the Clay Helton level, but in the Lynn Swann level, with all the issues that they've had that you would think are beyond Lynn Swann's control, with all the academic fraud and so forth. But the basketball, man, I am not well-versed enough on USC athletics across the board, and obviously football drives that more than anything else. But it could be a situation in which Lynn Swann, although it's going to be more difficult, I would say, to usher out a Lynn Swann based on his name and his ties to the university. He's an alma mater and an all-time great there at USC. Now, Clay Helton, my issue with Clay Helton, if I inherited Clay Helton, my observation of Clay Helton and the job that he has done at USC has been like a C-. So he would not be my coach at USC. There are far better coaches to get at USC, one of the top 5 to 10 jobs in the nation. But coming off 5-7, and I wouldn't fire a coach based on 5-7, depending on other things going on. Again, you got to put it within context. And if he bounces back with, let's say, an 8-4 season against a very difficult schedule, which includes Fresno State, Notre Dame outside the conference, then I got to think they win the division at 8-4 and 6-3 in the division in the conference. And it's mighty difficult to fire a coach coming off a conference championship game. But I would let him go. I would get rid of him unless he really achieved. He would have to win 10 games to stick around for me, 9 to 10 games. He would have to have a really strong season to prove to me that he's a better coach than I believe him to be. And I don't think Clay Helton's an awful coach. If Clay Helton was at Utah State, if Clay Helton was at a number of schools, even in the Power 5, I would not judge him so harshly, but I just know USC can do better. And this has been a team that has underachieved against like competition. Even when they won in 2016 and 17 and had their best season since Pete Carroll in going to the Rose Bowl, winning the Rose Bowl, and then the next season winning the Pac-12 championship game, as soon as they got to elite competition that was on their level, they not only lost those games, they were embarrassed against Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame. They didn't compete in those games. And they, of course, last season, they were a very undisciplined team. And he's not been able to reinforce those units on the field that have been weak. He's had since mid-2015 when he took over this program. So he's had the 2016 recruiting class, 17, 18, and 19. He's had 4 recruiting classes plus a half season to prepare for the first cycle. So most coaches come into the job and they don't have the luxury of being able to build into that first recruiting cycle because they get hired as soon as the season ends and they're playing catch-up. Clay Helton got the job with about 5 games left. And so he had the advantage over other first-year head coaches of being able to recruit. And now he's had 4 full recruiting classes. So this is his complete team. And they are just not good enough on the offensive line and the defensive line to compete outside the Pac-12 and even compete with the better teams in the Pac-12. So, yeah, they would have to have a big year if I was running the show. And I would just clearly state, yes, we improved from 5-7 to say, let's say they go 8-4 this year. But I would just explain it, and a lot of people wouldn't like it, that we're an elite football program and we need an elite head coach. And Clay Helton, we thank him for his service. He won a Pac-12 championship. He won a Rose Bowl. He did a reasonable job. I, of course, would phrase it differently in front of the public at the news conference, but I would just say we're an elite program and we aim to win national championships. And that's what we are going for. Therefore, we've got to bring in someone who's worthy of that kind of status. And Clay Helton he's had 4.5 years to get it done. And by that time, we're talking about 5.5 years to get it done. And that won't be the case. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Guess who it is? It's Deep Barat.
Deep Barat, the man who requested, who has this kind of power, who wields this kind of authority to call for the live show, and here the live show is.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just, you are the GOAT of college football on YouTube, so I have the obligation to request a call-in show.
You obviously know what buttons to push. Go ahead.
Cool, man. Yeah. So Texas just wrapped up its spring game. I just wanted to kind of give you my quick thoughts and perspectives, and obviously hear what you have to say, as well as kind of the audience in the chat as well. But yeah, I mean, this was a very kind of cold, rainy, windy day in Austin. And a lot of the expectations heading into the spring game were, could Texas's defense really step up? And could they actually replace the 12 or so starters that are leaving the program next year? And, what I actually saw from the first-string defense in the spring game, and I watched it, very well, like I'm a diehard Texas fan, like watching the spring game from start to finish, I do think that some of the younger kids, I wouldn't call them young-ish because, like, they are, like, sophomores and juniors. A couple of them are, like, redshirt juniors who are now about to start, and even a few seniors who are going to take over this offense heading into next season. Defense heading into next season. I think that the guys like Charles Omenihu and Gary Johnson and a couple of those CBs and cornerbacks that we're going to lose, like Chris Boyd. I think that a lot of these newer guys are going to step up, and I know it's a little bit too premature to really kind of place an emphasis on who's going to be the best Big 12 defense heading into next season. But I do believe that Texas is going to be one of the elite Big 12 defenses, if not the best Big 12 defense. And that's just based on what I saw in the spring game, that the recruiting cycles, and just Todd Orlando looks like a complete defensive coordinator from start to finish. I know that, it's still very early and we haven't seen how good he's going to be against this new Oklahoma team or some of the new up-and-coming Big 12 teams, but seeing guys like Jeffrey McCulloch and Malcolm Roach, who are now going to be both seniors leading this program next season, and seeing how they kind of contained Sam Ehlinger and even sacked him a few times in the spring game, I think that this defense is going to surprise the country. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a diehard Texas fan or anything, but I do think that the biggest hole that Texas, or the biggest question marks into this offseason for Texas, was the defensive line, and particularly the recruits that are going to, take over. Not really recruits, but I guess the guys who are on the bench or redshirting or weren't starters, taking over from the guys like Breckenhager and Charles Omenihu and Gary Johnson and quite a few of those guys, who are graduating. So that's good. But on the offensive side, Casey Thompson from the spring game is looking like a very clear number 2 quarterback. I think everyone knows that Sam Ehlinger is going to be the starter for Texas next year. He didn't have a great spring game, but I mean, it is spring football, and it was going up against Todd Orlando's defense in cold, rainy weather, and half of the time people weren't keeping score. But all in all, I am very impressed. And one last point I want to make, and I don't want to just ramble on forever. I do want to hear your thoughts, but the wide receiver core at Texas is very complete. And I don't want to say it's probably like maybe not the best in the country, but at least probably among the top 3 or top 5 in terms of depth and overall kind of balance in the wide receiving attack for Texas next year. And obviously, you've probably heard of guys like Colin Johnson and Devin Duvernay,
going to be seniors, but watch out for guys like Brew McCoy and who was the #1 athlete, Jordan Whittington, who's now going to be our #2 wide receiver, but also a running back, #2 running back. Watch out for the guys like these to really step up and really hustle. But all in all, man, I mean, I'm very satisfied from the spring game. There's obviously Ludacris, who's now playing at the spring game currently as a concert. But, you know, as a huge Texas fan, and, you know, I give you a lot of my analysis and input from Texas. I guess I'm one of your Texas insiders now, but I'm overall, I would say that, especially for the defensive end of Texas, as opposed to what a lot of people kind of thought or had question marks about heading into this offseason. And we don't really know who the wide receivers are going to be in terms of the starters, aside from those seniors that I mentioned, like Colin Johnson and Devin Duvernay. John Burt is another name I want to mention, simply because there's just a lot of depth. There's a lot of 4- and 5-star wide receivers in that attacking unit, and that's really going to be really key for guys like Sam Ehlinger when they're looking to pass the ball. So, yeah, man, I'm very excited for Texas heading into the offseason.
Okay, before you get off the line, I'm going to ask you a few questions kind of in light of what my perspective is on Texas football. So I thought the 2017 defense was exceptional. I thought it was extremely good. I was very impressed with the Texas defense in 2017, considering how anemic the offense was, and even against really good Big 12 competition on offense. I thought the obviously then they lost most of their best production of players, not necessarily the best talent coming in from the recruiting classes. Absolutely. And you know, prior to the kid Elliott, I love the defensive back. I can't think of his first name. That played safety for you. That was great. Anyway, so the defense took a bit of a step back last year, but as you well know, when you recruit top talent, you need to do it about 3 consecutive years. And now they're in that 3rd cycle of recruiting top 5 classes. And when you start to talk about reinforcing certain areas of the team, you don't know who's going to be able to come through out of those recruiting classes. Not everybody who's a 4- and 5-star is going to come through. But when you recruit, for example, and sign the elite array of defensive backs that they have over the last couple of years, well, most of them are going to come through. And if you bring in 6 or 7 4- and 5-stars, let's say at safety and cornerback, 4 or 5 of them are going to come through, and you're going to be well fortified and have one of the best units in the nation. And so my only concern with Texas is you have to tell me who is going to gain yardage running the ball from the running back position. Of course, Ehlinger does, but from the running back position, just between the offensive line and the running backs, that has just been severely missing.
Yeah, and I just want to bring in a very, very important point on that question is that, you know, a lot of questions for Texas heading into his offseason was who's going to be the #2 running back at Texas? Who's going to help out Keontae Ingram, who a lot of people have as going to be one of the key Big 12 running backs? I mean, he may not make a Heisman run or anything. I don't have any expectations of that. But I do think that in his tenure in Texas, the next 2-3 years, depending on how long he stays, he is going to be the #1 running back at Texas, at least until, let's say, we land like a Zachary Evans or a Ken Milton next cycle. The key thing, though, is that our #2 athlete recruit, I mean, #1 5-star athlete in the state of Texas, but also #2 in the country, Jordan Whittington, he's going to be our #2 runner. Almost guaranteed, not only from what we saw today in spring practice, I mean, the spring game, but I mean, just performing ever since he kind of was given the responsibility of becoming the #2 running back at Texas. And the thing is what I watched from the spring game and how he has played in the spring game is that they plan to use him as a combination of a running back who's going to get regular, reps, but also kind of like a wildcat wide receiver. So he's going to be like, the guy who will reduce the burden on Sam Ehlinger to run less next year. And just based on what Tom Herman has kind of said in his interviews, because I watched the game on Longhorn Network, and there's a few interviews on Tom Herman, is that they had him kind of saying that they want Ehlinger to run less next year. They want Ehlinger to obviously run because that's part of his game, right? He's a running quarterback like Tim Tebow, just run a little less because of the injury concerns, the shoulder concerns, and so on. And so this kid, Jordan Whittington, he was a 5-star athlete, recruit from Cuero, Texas. A lot of guys had him playing like wide receiver immediately, but because, as I mentioned, the running back room at Texas, aside from Keontae Ingram, is a little light. To supplement Ingram, I think that you're going to see next season Jordan Whittington having those 10 to 15 reps. And the thing is, the kid is a high schooler, right? I mean, he just came out of high school. He's an early enrollee at Texas. The thing is with him is that he doesn't know what the running back kind of game is. So you're still developing him as a traditional running back. And a lot of people say that Whittington has the potential to become a superstar running back. I mean, we don't know how good he's going to be because he's never really played the college game yet. But people are saying at Texas that he's ahead of Ingram from where he was at his freshman year. So high expectations for Whittington to kind of bridge that gap, that running back gap. And as I mentioned, final point on the running back situation is that landing Zachary Evans is huge for Texas in 2020. You don't land that kid, I mean, the running back room is going to be very light heading into, the next few seasons or so, because Ingram would kind of graduate and kind of, leave after 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, and you need you definitely need 2 guys. You certainly have seen where a stable of 4 running backs has been used at Alabama, but you need definitely 2 for sure, and more like 3 or 4 to save injuries and to combat just diversity in the passing game and have guys that can do different things at the running back position. And that's the one thing that I've seen out of Texas, even last season with their success, is that they had a marginal running game from the running back position. They relied on Ehlinger more than anything to gain their rushing yards and pick up their big 3rd down conversions with his legs.
Yeah, and we had 2 running backs transfer from Texas this year because they weren't getting enough reps. And part of the reason is it's just, it is very competitive, at a school like Texas. I know you're a big Ohio State fan. I mean, any top offensive school is going to be hard to have 3 or 4 or even 5 top, let's say 4 or 5-star running backs, simply because, those guys want to have snaps. They want to actually compete to get an NFL draft stock that's going to be high. And if you don't get those snaps, I mean, you're going to transfer to another program. And so that's kind of what happened to Texas this past offseason. It's 2 guys transferred simply because Keontae Ingram had like a record-breaking freshman year for Texas. And he is the lead running back for Texas. And Jordan Whittington will supplement him as a true freshman next year. And we're hoping that Ehlinger has to run a little bit less simply because of that shoulder injury that he acquired. I think it was like week 5 or 6 against Baylor. So week 7 against Baylor last year. So high expectations for Texas in the offseason. But more than anything, high expectations for that wide receiver room, simply because of not only the incoming class of wide receivers, but the previous 2 or 3 cycles, as you mentioned, under Tom Herman, have been top 3 recruiting classes according to the 24/7 composite. And in each of those receiving classes, Texas has not only been able to acquire the top wide receivers in Texas, but they've also been able to acquire some of the best athletes who are going to be playing wide receiver throughout the entire country. So that's going to be the key for Texas, is how do you utilize that wide receiver room, and how are you going to, I guess, elevate the game of the defense heading into next season. And the very last point I want to make on this, Mark, is that Texas have 3 or 4 5-star defensive players. I know that a lot of people don't consider Texas to be DBU or anything. I mean, some people do. I mean, Texas fans do, obviously, but the entire country doesn't really think of Texas as DBU. But Texas does indeed have, quite a few guys like B.J. Foster, Caden Stearns, Tyler Owens, or like 5-star safeties, who are now developing and grooming into the system. And high expectations are for them heading into next season that, you know, they step up the game and hopefully contain, you know, wide receivers in the Big 12, especially from teams like, you know, OU, who have several 5-star wide receivers. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. I am very bullish on the defense compared to what I previously was. But again, it's just a spring game, and it was kind of in that winter, cold, rainy kind of weather in Austin. You know, who's to say the spring game really had that much kind of impact? But that's just my analysis, and yeah, appreciate you taking the call, man.
All right, Deep Barat, we appreciate it. Thanks for the insight into the Longhorns. All right, Deep Barat, keeping us in step with Texas football, with the Longhorns apparently playing in the rain in Austin for their spring game. And another reason to be bullish on Texas is that Oklahoma may take a bit of a step back. So Jalen Hurts is not the quarterback that Kyler Murray is. The offensive line at Oklahoma has been one of the best, the very best in the nation, right in that top 3 to 5 standing over the past few years. Maybe they maintain that. I'm not saying that they're going to be downgraded at offensive line, but it's just a question. Many times offensive lines maintain great play at certain institutions like a Wisconsin, for example, because of the process, because of the coaching. Offensive line coaching, I believe, is more important than at any unit on the field. You need more cohesion. You need more versatile players because of injuries. They can play different positions along the offensive front, because you just won't want to plant a guy at tackle or guard, and then if they get hurt, bring in the guy from the bench. You want to be able to put the 5 best players, the best healthy bodies, the 5 on the field. You don't want to go to like your 8th best player just because he's a guard. And so the coaching and the scheme and the cohesion along the offensive line is very important, and Oklahoma's had that. They've had the talent and the coaching and development and the productivity at the offensive line, and that gets dismissed. People don't think offensive line all the time. They think about the wide receivers and running backs, and of course 2 Heisman-winning quarterbacks there. So they're going to take a drop at the quarterback position. Now, Jalen Hurts is really good. He's certainly, though he's not Kyler Murray in the run game, for as good as he is as a runner, Kyler Murray's like Johnny Manziel, faster, but has that kind of juice running the ball, and Kyler Murray's a much better passer than Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is much better than he was as a freshman or sophomore. He's improved in that category, and certainly Lincoln Riley wouldn't take him in if he didn't think that he could run the offense and run it at peak level or close to it. But I guarantee that Oklahoma's offense isn't going to be as good as it was. Hollywood Brown's gone. Rodney Anderson's gone, even though he was hurt and not much of a factor last year. He had a tremendous season 2 years ago. And so they've lost quite a bit on offense. And again, Lincoln Riley's system is one of the best in the nation, and they have guys replacing them. But I expect the offense not to be as good. The defense is supposed to be better, but I've got to see it first. Keep hearing that Oklahoma's addressed the defense. They fired Stoops and their current defensive situation, and bringing in Alex Grinch from Ohio State. And he did a bang-up job at Washington State, elevating one of the worst 25 defenses in college football at the FBS level into a top 25 or 30 defense statistically at Washington State. So we'll see what kind of impact Alex Grinch has. So Texas fans, you may be bullish about your team, but you can be a little bit more bullish. Not that Oklahoma is going to drop off considerably. That's not what I'm saying, but they may not be quite at peak performance offensively, and we still have to see it defensively. All right, to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We've got another call coming in, and so therefore we will take it, and then I'll dive into the live chat and address what you have here. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's MCD Sports 4.
Hey, man, what's going on?
Hey, I wasn't going to call in, but I was listening to your live stream earlier today, and I kind of really disagree with something that was said in that. Something that you said that I wanted to debate about. There was a question asked about outside of the Power 5 conferences, which one of the Group of 5 conferences was the strongest, and you said the American.
Yeah.
I would like to disagree with that and say the Mountain West.
Okay.
And the reason why is because I think the Mountain West is deeper
Okay.
than the American.
All right.
And let me lay it out for you.
Okay, lay it out for me.
So,
You know, the last time you laid something out for me, you were agreeing with me about 10 minutes later. All right, go to it. Go to it.
Okay. Well, the American, obviously, UCF. I mean, 27-1 over the past 2 years. I mean, just an amazing run. But I'm talking about going into next season, the Barrett Conference out of school. I'm talking about next season. But Mackenzie Milton, he's out. I think UCF is going to lose a game somewhere in the regular season. I don't know where, but I think they will. Houston, I think Houston's probably the second best team in the American. Obviously, getting the coach from West Virginia, his name escapes me at this. His name escapes me.
Who escapes you? Whose name?
The head coach of Houston.
Oh, Major Applewhite.
Not Major Applewhite, the new coach.
Oh, Josh Heupel. No, Josh Heupel's at UCF. The new Houston coach, Dana Hogerson. Hello. Yes.
Yeah, Dana Hogerson. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, his name escaped me. They're the second best team in the American. They're going to be in the championship with UCF. Like, in my opinion, you might as well just pencil that in. South Florida, I think they have an easy schedule this year. And I think Charlie Strong, I think he could possibly gear together a 10-2 season with the schedule. You look at Memphis. Memphis, to me, is kind of down. Like their defense is not really that good, in my opinion. Like, as a matter of fact, I think it's trash. So I look at Memphis, and to me, Memphis is just like an 8-4, 9-3 team. Temple and Cincinnati, to me, are kind of in the same boat. Probably, like, Cincinnati, to me, overachieved a little bit last season. This season, I'm probably going to say 9-3, 8-4 for Cincinnati. Same thing with Temple. I know Cincinnati has a lot returning back, but I think they did overachieve. And then you look at other teams around the American. You got Navy. They are looking to bounce back. They might bounce back. Tulane has been improving over the past few years. SMU is kind of a middle-of-the-road team. I think East Carolina could possibly bid for a bowl game this year. They have the new head coach. He's from JMU. So I think, and their schedule's kind of easy, actually. So I think they could possibly bid for one, even though I highly doubt it. And Tulsa and UConn are just in the toilet. But when you look at the Mountain West, I think it's deeper because I think you have more teams that could contend for the Mountain West. I'll start in the Mountain division. You got Boise State. To me, they should be the outright favorite, being the Mountain West champions from last season. You have Utah State as well. I know they have a new head coach, but they do have a lot of returning talent. Then you go to the Mountain West. Fresno State should be the favorite. To me, Fresno State has a shot to go 12-0 this year. I think they have this. I think that's the team that could be better than UCF and represent the group of 5 in the New Year's Six bowls. I also think Boise State can do it as well, but I think Boise State might lose a game or two. And then you look around the other teams in the Mountain West, in the Mountain Division. Wyoming, I know they recruit very bad, but that head coach's name also escapes me. In my opinion, he gets the best out of his talent. Like, he developed Josh Allen, and he's an NFL starting quarterback. So I really think Wyoming is a team that you can't sleep on. And Colorado State, I know they're a little bit down right now, but I think they're going to turn it around here in the next year or two. And Colorado State has always been known to be like a 7-5, 8-4 program. Air Force usually hovers around the 6-6 area. They're usually like a rugged program. I think they run that triple option, I believe. So to me, Air Force is one of those teams that like they're kind of like the Tulane of the Mountain West. And then you go ahead and look at the West Division: Nevada, San Diego State, and Hawaii. All three of those teams made bowl games last year. San Diego State, a very consistent team there. They always seem to go 9-3. I know they were a little bit down last year, but I think they're going to rebound. And then Nevada, that team is growing. Nevada is a dark horse to win the Mountain West, in my opinion. Hawaii, they're running that run-and-shoot offense. The quarterback on that team, McDonald, I think he's one. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the group of five. And then obviously UNLV, San Jose State.
So MCD4 Sports, the more you grind through the bottom, the underbelly of the Mountain West, the more viewers are lost. So let's stick to the top of the league, because I don't mind talking about Air Force and New Mexico State, but nobody's going to hang with this conversation at all. So do two things for me this season. I want you to track any games that are played between the Mountain West and the American Conference, which of course it depends on where those particular teams are seated within their conference, but also just track those games. Also track the wins and losses that each one of those conferences have against the Power Five and so forth, because I don't mind you projecting toward 2019, because of course that's the season we're headed toward, but we don't know what's going to happen in 2019. I know that in 2018, the American Conference had more quality teams than the Mountain West. If you go 5 and 6 deep in the American, you're still looking at Temple, Houston, UCF, USF, Memphis. They were much deeper. Once you get past those three top teams in the Mountain West last year, there was considerable drop-off in quality after Utah State, Boise State, and Fresno State.
True. I do think a lot of teams were down in the Mountain West last year, but I think this upcoming season, I think the Mountain West is going to be the better conference.
Okay.
And one other factor I want to throw in there, in the American Championship, it was UCF versus an unranked Memphis team.
Sure.
Both teams in the Mountain West Championship were ranked at that time of the championship. I believe.
Yeah.
Boise State was 21. Fresno State was like 23.
You may realize from watching me how much credibility I put into the rankings other than my own. But there were two ranked teams in the Mountain West playing in the championship game. This is correct.
So I just personally think, like, just looking at the teams, like I'm telling you, Mark, Nevada is a team you want to watch out for. Nevada gets Purdue earlier in the season at home. They could very well beat Purdue, in my opinion. They have the talent to do it. And they also get a road trip to Oregon. They probably won't win that, but watch that game against Purdue. I think that's probably a 50-50 game right there for Nevada.
I would not agree that it's a 50-50 game, but I would not be surprised if Nevada beat Purdue. Yes, it's a very winnable game for Nevada. The Wolfpack could win that game. I'm going to say more in the 60-40 range. You're telling me that game's where?
It's in Nevada.
Okay.
You know Nevada.
Purdue's still better. They should win the game, but it wouldn't be a big shock to me if Nevada won that game. Again, the American has been the best of the non-Power 5 leagues. I don't think there's any question about it. Look at the performance against even the elite Power 5 teams. What Houston, Central Florida, South Florida, Memphis have been able to do against good Power 5 competition on a regular basis for 3 and 4 years. I don't know if that's going to continue. And I remember what was stated on the earlier live stream. I certainly said that the Mountain West was right there. I didn't say that the American was number 6 and then everybody else was awful, but I certainly gave credence to the Mountain West and considered, and I didn't line up the conferences and do a big research project on it. I was just asked who the best non-Power 5 league was, and in a quick scan of the conference, And I would still have more confidence in the American Conference playing better against the Power Five and playing just better overall, especially the top half of the conference, than what was last year, a 3-team league. And then there was a huge drop off. I did my rankings 132-1. And after those 3 teams, which I all had ranked in the top 30 to 35 in the nation, there was just a large drop off where there was more depth, at least last season and for the past few seasons, in the in the American Conference. And certainly don't discount what Cincinnati did. They were an extremely good team last year. Temple beat Maryland by 3 or 4 touchdowns, and you should understand that. You should remember that game. And then Temple also took Duke down to the wire in their bowl game, and that was a Temple team that was, a 2nd or 3rd place team in the American in their division.
Yeah, I was worried about the Temple loss. But another game to look out for: Utah State at Wake Forest. You don't think Utah State has a shot in that?
Absolutely, they do. Wake Forest almost lost to Tulane last year. They got taken to overtime by Tulane.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, there you go. There's another feather in the cap of the American. Not even close to the top of the league. Tulane took Wake Forest to overtime, and Wake Forest went on to 7-6 and a bowl victory over who they beat. I'm losing it right now. They beat Memphis. And that was a close game that went down to the wire.
Fresno State at USC.
I'll give USC a 70% chance of winning that game.
I wouldn't. I would think that'll be 50-50.
50-50
versus Florida State. Yeah.
Florida State, Boise State. I'm going to say Florida State's got a 60% chance of winning that game.
Okay, that's fair. Nevada also goes to Oregon. I don't think they're going to beat Oregon per se, but Hawaii does get Oregon State and Arizona from the Pac-12. I think both of those games are winnable for Hawaii.
Sure.
Fresno State also gets Minnesota at home. I think Fresno State should be favored in that game.
Houston also killed Arizona last year.
True. I think Hawaii has a chance to do the same thing.
UCF beat the ACC championship runner-up Pitt last year by 31 points. And played within a touchdown of LSU. I don't think anybody in the Mountain West last year would have played within a touchdown of LSU in a bowl game.
Utah State gets a shot this year against LSU.
Who does?
Utah State.
Yeah, they've got a shot. They got a puncher's chance.
I'm just saying the end of the game. Hawaii gets to go up against Washington. Air Force and Colorado State goes up against Colorado. Colorado State goes up against Arkansas. I'm just reading off the games to you. I'm looking at the schedule. But I think a lot of these games in the Mountain West are very winnable. These out-conference games in the Mountain West. I think a lot of them are very winnable.
Yeah, it looks like a bunch of good games. And, of course, the Mountain West is going to play more games against the Pac-12 than certainly the American, so they're difficult to evaluate from that standpoint. There's a lot of Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is arguably the worst of the Power 5 leagues. So the Mountain West is matched up fairly well against the Pac-12 with a win over Arizona State by San Diego State this past year, and San Diego State knocked off Stanford, of course, 2 years ago. All right, MCD4. We appreciate the call. I think people are going to grow a little tired of the Group of 5 Mountain West breakdown.
Okay. Thanks.
Appreciate the call, man. Talk to you later. Yeah, we gave you about like 25 minutes on the Mountain West. So I don't know that anyone cares to hear that. All right, here we go. Let's run through the live chat. Shoot, I can't go all the way to the top. So anybody who commented early, my apologies. It only gives me a certain section, so I can't go all the way to the top. SEC Dog, 4-loss ACC champion in 1969, but that's more than Miami has done in the ACC. I don't know what he's talking about there, but there have been a number of 4-loss ACC champions. Go back to 2005. Florida State finished 8-5 and won the ACC. David Corson, FSU is going to be good this year. Please define good. Is 8-4 good? I think they can go 8-4. Lateralist Deep Barrage just made a Texas video. He did. We'll have to check that out. Cashboy D. Oh, just made a Texas video here. You might be right. I may just have to release that as a Texas video. I think the last one got like 1,000 to 1,500 views, so why not? Cashboy D, Miami defense, nasty. That boy Nesta, some serious I watch. The all spring game, he has some serious, but I still got what? How's Cashboy D? All right, too many typos, can't hang with it. Appreciate the comment. Of course, Miami spring game, which I considered going to. Had Miami spring game not been on Easter weekend, I believe I would have gone. I've got a few trips planned here coming up in the next month or so, and that would have been another one. But Easter weekend, my daughter's having car problems. I've got to bring her car back, and a lot of things going on there. And it's Easter weekend. I'm not going to miss my daughter. But I thought about that. And now what I'm thinking about, and it's probably too late to consider this. So a number of people, including Alonso Oliver, Zoe1219, invited me to come down for the Miami, Florida game, which at the time was scheduled for August 31st, but now it's been moved back. And my very valid excuse when it was August 31st is I'm the voice of college football. I need to watch all the games, 4 screens, games going on all over the place. I can't devote myself and focus on one game and travel to one game, and that's all I get. And it's tough to keep track of and impossible to do any analysis on the other games for as much as I would enjoy doing that. But with the Miami, Florida game moved back to August 24th, maybe I go to the Miami, Florida game. It's the only game in town. Arizona's playing Hawaii, but who cares? It's the only game in town. Maybe I go to that game, have a big time. We do a lot of good analysis there. That would be fun. And then I get all geared up to come back here on August 31st and ramp up for week 1. All right. Maybe. Going to have to look into credentials. All right. David Corson, FSU won 15 championships. I believe that's in the ACC. Of course it is. Deep Rob, probably the last Texas update I have for a while. Cashboy D. Greg Bush, year in, year out, the SEC hangs their hats on Alabama as the be-all and end-all of the SEC. There's a huge drop-off from Bama to the next best team, which is probably Georgia. Okay, well, Greg, I appreciate the statement there, which is true when it comes to national championships. That's all there's been from the SEC recently, depending on what your definition of recent is. For most conferences, that spans 10 or 15 years. Well, despite Nick Saban's run, Auburn did sneak in and win a national championship in 2010. They did get back in there in 2013. Georgia got back to a national championship game in 2017, and Alabama kept them out in 2018 in winning the SEC. So if you compare that to the Big 12 or the Pac-12 in particular, even the Big 10 by some measurements, even with Alabama out of the way, even put them to the side, and you can't do that, but I understand your point. If you do put Alabama to the side, well, Georgia just played in a national championship game in 2017, and the only reason they lost is that they played another SEC team. So you can look at that as one way or the other. SEC critics can say, of course, the SEC won the national championship game. They had 2 teams in it, just like 2011. At least in 2017, those 2 teams had to earn it. They had to beat teams from other conferences to get there. Alabama beat Clemson. Georgia beat Oklahoma. In 2011, now that was really sketchy, being placed and given national championship game spots, LSU and Alabama. But even if you take Alabama out of the mix, which again, you can't, because if you do, we would have to play mind games and insert team number 2, second place team in the SEC, into the college football playoff or into the BCS formula and say, would they have made it? What would they have done? We can't do that. But even before Alabama's run, LSU, 2003 champs, 2007 champs, Florida, 2006 and 08 champs, Auburn in 2010. They get back there in 2013. Georgia, 2017. So, yes, the SEC, in terms of championships, has hung its hat on Alabama. But, man, if you took Alabama out of the SEC, I don't know that I don't say that the SEC is still not the best conference. Robert, remember they are playing against their own team in the spring game. And I wouldn't say necessarily, Greg, that there's a huge drop-off between Alabama and Georgia. Check out the SEC championship game from last year where Georgia outplayed Alabama for 55 minutes before Alabama scored 2 touchdowns late to win it out 35-28. And then the season before, Georgia, of course, led by 13 points at halftime, and Tua pulled it out in overtime. So that's not a big drop-off. And that's 2 games. If it was 1 game, but 2 games, 2 consecutive years, I think that gives us pretty good indication where Georgia was versus Alabama. David Corson. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. It's great to have you, David. This is the first time I've seen your handle. Therefore, I believe it's the first time you've been on here commenting. So welcome to the channel. I hope you found a home for college football discussion, debate, and analysis. P. Digits. You definitely took the spring game in. How many fans showed up? P. Digits. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thank you for joining as well. Dennis Wilson, SEC dog. Last I checked, Athens hasn't done anything since 1980. Dennis, I'm not going to dive into it. I am not going to dive into it. I really don't agree with, and I understand it's an easy slam to make if your team's won national championships more recently than the team or program you're slamming. If that's all you're going by, I don't think that the national championship argument is the end all be all. I just really don't. I think it's more valid in other sports, in baseball with the World Series or with any other professional sport, because the system is objective and all the teams had the same criteria to enter into the playoff field. In college football, it's been a mess and continues to be a mess, just a little bit more structured mess with 2 more opportunities for teams to get into the playoff chase. But it's still biased. It's still subjective. And so national championships, yeah, they're meaningful. Definitely. That team proved under this format that they were selected to play with 3 other teams, and they were the best team in that 4-team format. And they were good enough to at least deserve consideration. Whether they deserve to be in Alabama 2017, Ohio State 2016, etc., I don't know. I don't believe so. They didn't win a conference championship. If they weren't the best team in their own conference, why are they in? But they were at least under consideration because they had a really good record and beat other good teams, although Alabama didn't in 2017. So national championships, yeah, I am not sold on just making that the gold standard. I understand that's the championship and it's recognized as the championship. But if we're doing what we do here, which is smart analysis, that's not the end all be all. It's not the end all be all. You can't tell me that because Georgia Tech has the same number of national championships as Michigan since 1990, that Georgia Tech has been as good a football program as Michigan since 1990 and should have bragging rights to the extent of Michigan. You cannot tell me, since Georgia Tech has more national championships since 1990 than Wisconsin, that there's any comparison between those 2 football programs. There's not. Wisconsin has achieved and accomplished way beyond Georgia Tech in the last 30 years. But Georgia Tech won a national championship, and Wisconsin did not. And Michigan State did not. And Stanford did not. But Georgia Tech's better. Colorado's better. Colorado's a better football program. Colorado has bragging rights over Wisconsin and Michigan State. And who else? Kansas State. No, they don't. They don't. Just because they backed into a national championship. No, that doesn't sell me, because they had one good season and they backed into a national championship, that they have bragging rights over schools that were good and competed at the highest level year after year after year and churned out top 10 teams. No. All right. Cashboy D, Josh Jobe starting this year. He looks amazing all spring, even in the day today. Oh, the 8A game. All right. I'm going to have to proofread these comments before I go through them. Willis. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Willis, it's great to have you. I hope you found a home. Please lock it in. Hello, Mr. Rogers. It's Big Will here. What do you think about the offense in this number 2 scrimmage this year for the Canes? What do I think about the offense in this number 2 scrimmage? I have no idea what the Miami team did in their number 2 scrimmage. I didn't read about it. I didn't look into it. Just a little too much for me to take in. Willis, I apologize, but I hope you enjoy the Miami content that we provide. It's one of the reasons I bring in, I explained this last night, that I'll put myself up against anyone in regards to national college football talk in knowing the top 10 to 15 players on every team in the nation. Maybe not right this second, but I will when they're playing the games in September. And knowing what's going on, again, big picture, and then grinding down to personnel among the top 20 or 30 teams in the country, especially those teams. But yeah, I don't keep track of Miami scrimmage. I've got people to come on and supplement the granular stuff. To hit the granular, I hit the big stuff. All right. 13,000 at the Florida State game, according to Dave Corson. Deeper Rod, Iowa State also on the rise. So Deeper Rod, when you mentioned best Big 12 defenses, I thought immediately Texas, TCU, Iowa State. And I know TCU has most of its personnel coming back on defense. SEC Dog, why did Tennessee fire Lyle for Pruitt? Stats don't lie. Lyle 4-0, Pruitt 0-1, game 1 last year. Lyle only needed a few more bricks. Dennis, right. Pete Digits. I like watching Iowa State too. I really enjoyed the Alamo Bowl between Washington State and Iowa State. Dave Corson, if Alabama was in the ACC, they would not do good. Really? Come on, David. David, I hope you're joking. You're joking, right? If Alabama was in the ACC playing Wake in Boston College every week, it would just be so difficult for them to pull through that. Alabama. Lateralists. The American Conference is better. The only good team in the ACC is Clemson. Depending on your definition of good, I will say the only really good team, the only elite team certainly is Clemson. There's just such a huge drop-off between Clemson and the rest of the conference. It's not even close. I explained this again during a live stream either last night or earlier today. Think about this. There is nothing the ACC has on a national level to compete with the other top 5 teams in any conference other than Clemson. They need, meaning the ACC, Florida State and Miami, to fulfill their potential to reinforce the rosters, to get the coaching development where it should be, to bring these rosters and the performance on the field back to where it should be, where these teams are winning 9, 10, 11 games a year. Because otherwise, NC State has proven that they will never be a national power. I thought they had a chance under Dave Doran recently with the defensive line that they brought to the table, some of the great playmakers on offense with Jalen Samuels and Kelvin Harmon, and of course, Ryan Finley, a quarterback. But NC State has been a major disappointment, and they've missed their window, at least for now. Dave Doran got a big contract extension, even though he's only won like 45% of his games in conference. The rest of the ACC is a bunch of like top 40 to 45 teams. They're almost all in the same bucket. Pitt, Georgia Tech, Duke, UNC, Virginia, Wake, BC, they're all the same team in terms of quality. The ACC is Clemson, Florida State, and Miami have the potential. I'm not saying they're the next best teams. They weren't last year. It was Syracuse and probably NC State, but they're the two schools with the resources, the talent, and the recruiting base, the prestige, and the brand name to elevate the conference. The ACC needs Florida State, Miami to lift the conference. That would be like if Ohio State was crushing the Big Ten and Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Northwestern, all these other teams were awful. They're not. They're good. Penn State's going to Rose Bowls and winning Fiesta Bowls and finishing in the top 15 in the nation. Michigan, despite their late season issues against Ohio State, is going to the Orange Bowl, beating Florida in bowl games. Not last season. Of course, I'm talking in the last several years. Michigan State's winning 10 games 2 years ago. They're within the last 5 or 6 years winning Rose Bowls, Cotton Bowls, going to college football playoffs. Northwestern's going to a Holiday Bowl and beating Utah. They're winning 9 games. They're winning 10 games 2 of the last 3 seasons. Wisconsin's churning out top 15 teams typically. They're going 13-1 and winning the Orange Bowl. They're winning the Cotton Bowl the year before. The Big Ten has a stacked lineup between 2 and 5 and 6 in that range to lift Ohio State and support them. It's not Clemson and nothing. Even the Big 12 has support with what TCU's done over the last 5 years. Texas coming back. Iowa State's been good, decent. West Virginia's been good the last couple years. Who am I missing? Kansas State was good. The Big 12 would be the closest to what we've seen with Clemson and nobody else. They would be the next closest, but not even close. Even the Pac-12, for as bad as the Pac-12 is in not being elite, at least it has 5 teams that are good. And I'm talking not specifically 2018. I'm talking the last several years. Washington, Stanford, Oregon, Arizona State, Utah, USC a few years ago in 2015, 16, 17. All right. Lateralists, I appreciate the support. Thank you. Cashboy D and some others believe that Miami will be good. Miami should be good. What is going on? Miami should be good. All they have to do is get about 30% of the recruits in their own backyard, and we have researched the numbers here. Cam and I came under State of the U. We went through the numbers one time, and credit to him, he brought the numbers. I've looked them up as well. If Miami just does a marginal job of recruiting the bottom half of Florida, they will bring in enough 4-star recruits to bring in a top 15 class. And if you bring in a top 15 class and you've got a good coaching staff, especially in that awful division, you should win 10 games. They should be marching into the Russell Athletic Bowl like it's nothing. They should go to New Year's Six bowl games every 2 to 3 times out of a 5-year span. That should be no issue. Playing North Carolina and Georgia Tech and Duke and these schools every week. Virginia Tech's been down. They're nothing close to what they were in Frank Beamer's heyday. That would be the other school. I put a lot on Miami and Florida State, but of course, Virginia Tech has a reasonable recruiting base and national brand, and they've proven under Frank Beamer that they can be that good, but it's just been so long for them, too, that they've been decent. They've churned out a ton of 8-4 seasons over the last 10 years, and they did give Clemson a run at the ACC championship game in, 2016? But we see what Virginia Tech is now. They're a top 40 to 50 team. And I don't expect that to change this season. So they're just another Pitt, Georgia Tech right now. Seth Meehan. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Seth, I hope you're still on the line to hear this greeting and welcome to Mark Rogers TV. I hope you've subscribed. Share the videos, like and comment. Help us build the channel. Our aim is to deliver the best in discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. All right. Who else do we have? Deeper Rod, college football playoff teams for 2019, Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. All right. Willis chimes in again. Mr. Rogers, do you think that Miami needs a top 5 or better to complete with the top teams in college football like Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State? I don't really know what you're talking about. A top 5 recruiting class? Okay. Here's the deal, Willis. If you're asking about my judgment of where Miami places among the pantheon of college football, they don't right now. Alabama and Clemson are the 2 best programs in the country. In reality, I don't believe that Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia are far behind, but because of the perception of reaching and winning the championship game, which those 2 teams have done consistently since 2015, they have separated themselves. Then there's another tier that's Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma. And then there's a mess of teams, probably about a dozen. LSU, Florida. And I'm not just talking about teams in 2018. I'm talking about programs. Washington, Texas, Michigan. And then kind of the lower portion of that tier, Wisconsin, TCU, Stanford. Maybe Washington State. They've had 2 consecutive really good seasons. Utah, possibly. Probably we've gone to another tier there. Miami's there. Miami right now, let's face facts. Yes, those 5 championships, they were great, and they're on their resume all time. If we are talking all time, they're on their resume. Miami's a very unique case when it comes to a resume all time, because you got your blue bloods. Ohio State's a blue blood. Oklahoma's a blue blood. Alabama's a blue blood. Those are clear blue bloods. Notre Dame, USC. Those are blue bloods. Sorry, LSU fans, you're not a blue blood. You've been really good since Nick Saban took over. Before that, you weren't any good for 30 years. You were okay. You had a lot of 7-5 seasons, a lot of 8-4 seasons. So there's only a handful of true blue bloods that all-time are blue bloods and have maintained it to the current day. Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, still going to include USC. They've only had 1 down season. They were winning Rose Bowls and going to Pac-12 championship games just a couple of years ago. And Pete Carroll was only 10 years removed from really winning as big as anyone has since 2000. Save Alabama. Miami, what is Miami right now? Miami's not as successful as Utah. Miami's not as successful, nearly as successful as Wisconsin. They're not. It's not even close. They're not as successful as Michigan State. Who is Miami? Miami's NC State. Miami's Utah. Miami's Kansas State. Miami's Tennessee, the current Tennessee. Again, Tennessee all-time or Tennessee now. And when I say now again, I'm not saying just specifically 2018 because then USC takes a drop, but I'm saying a collective number of years, and that keeps USC in the conversation. We're not going to just take 5 and 7 and say, well, they're horrible now, just like Florida State. Florida State up until last year or the last 2 years was still going to Orange Bowls and winning and finishing in the top 10. And they just won a national championship in 2013 and went back to the playoff in 2014. So Florida State still not elite right this second, but I don't mind if somebody says Florida State's elite. Miami, it's 2003 would be the last time that you would say Miami is an elite program. Maybe I need to talk to Cam about this sometime. I'm sure we would knock heads on this conversation because he still considers Miami elite. And I get it because he's thinking two things. He's thinking all time, we've got 5 national championships from 1983 through 2001. In those 28 seasons, Miami won it 5 times. Okay, that was great. They had the most national championships over the span of 25 to 30 years, to their credit. Before that, they were nothing. Since then, they've been nothing. They've got a 30-year history of excellence, 25 to 30 years of excellence. They've got nothing else. It's the most unique situation. Even Florida State was more extended and consistent in winning because Miami had the run from 83 to 94. Then they got in trouble and they were bad, not relevant for about 5 or 6 years. And then Butch Davis came in and they were good. And Larry Coker won the national championship and they got back to the national championship game the next season. And then since then, they've been winning 60% of their games. I guarantee that Miami's winning percentage since 2004 is like 62%. That's not elite. Miami's Mississippi State. Right now, they are Mississippi State. They're Iowa. They're not Wisconsin. They're not even close to Wisconsin. If we continue to see Michigan State go 3-9, 10-3, 7-6 last year, maybe they're Michigan State, but look at what Mark D'Antonio accomplished from 2010, back it up, 2009 to 15. For those 6 or 7 years, man, Michigan State was elite. They were elite, except for not winning the championship. They got to the brink of elite. They were Georgia for those 6 or 7 years. Now they've taken a step back, and they're probably not going to be able to get back. They just don't have the recruiting footprint to do it. You guys probably either like or hate when I start to get to something jars me, triggers me, and then I go on a rant and calling Miami elite. And so, Willis, I hope I didn't misinterpret your question because it was just had typos all over the place. I didn't know what you were talking about when you said, does Miami need a top 5 to be? If Miami finished in the top 5 this year, let's say they just, boom, came out, they go 11-1. They either lose a close ACC championship game and then win a big bowl game, or they get to the college football playoff and lose and whatever. They finish 12-2, something in that range, 11-2, 12-2. Well, I would say I would not just automatically say Miami's elite, just like I wouldn't have automatically said that Washington's elite because they made the playoff in 2016. Washington is not quite elite right now. Again, they're under Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma. They're in that next LSU category. LSU, Florida, Washington, and others, Michigan. Yes, lateralist. Miami is not elite. You cannot go that long. Now, Oklahoma in the 90s was down. Texas in the 90s was down. And then, of course, up until last year was down since 2010 or 11. USC, a good example, before Pete Carroll took over. And now possibly they could be in another tailspin. But those are all-time elite programs. And then, yes, at a certain point, if you're bad, like if Texas would continue, let's say for another 5 years to do what they were doing under Charlie Strong, I would say, well, they're not elite. They're a blue blood all time, and they still have all those numbers behind them all time, but they're currently not elite. And they're not elite right this second, but Texas is an elite all-time program. Swampy McGee, all-time blue bloods, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame. That's it? You're stopping right there. You're not going to go USC, Oklahoma. Nebraska is a good question. Penn State, Nebraska. They're on the kind of the bottom of that list, on that very top list. That's Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma, Texas, Penn State, Nebraska. And I probably missed somebody, although I don't think I did. Yes, Deeper Rod, Texas is a blue blood all time. And they might be emerging as a blue blood and a elite program right now. Dennis, my man Dennis, always ready to fight me. Mark Rogers, so Miami being drudged in the dirt by the NCAA and sanctions doesn't count for anything. The bottom line is winning. And whatever brought you down, whether it was poor administration, poor coaching hires, it's usually some combination of those things. Regardless of what it is, if you can't perform on the field, then that's how you're judged. We're talking about the best programs in the country. Miami right now, they went 7-6 last year. They went 10-3 and lost to anybody who was any good the year before. They went 9-4 and won a decent bowl game the year before, and that was their first bowl win in 11 or 12 years. An elite program, or not even a good program, doesn't go 12 years without winning a bowl game. And I could attempt to recite this all myself, but I won't. All right, listen to these records. I'll try something here. Listen to these records. 9-5, 7-6, 9-4, 10-3, 9-4, 5-7, 5-7, 8-5, 10-3, 10-3, 13-0, 9-4, 8-5, 7-5. I knew I was going to run into that 13-0. I didn't want that to mess anybody up. And 12-0 in 2004. That's Utah. Utah, I guarantee, is winning more games over the last 15 years than Miami. Swampy McGee between 53 and 57. Bud Wilkinson's Oklahoma squad's won 47 straight games. Yes, we know that. Thank you for the reinforcements there. La Potencia. Hey, Mark, thoughts on Kyler Murray? Do you think he's going first overall? Yes, I do. I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to draft him number 1. My son told me today that Cliff Kingsbury has announced that there will be a cell phone break during practices. That in addition to the regular breaks where the guys can get water and rest and hang out and get some shade, that there will be breaks specifically to get on their phones. Cliff Kingsbury is a loser. He is not going to win in the NFL. Mark it down right now. He couldn't turn around Texas Tech, and he had a program given to him that was winning already. Mike Leach, I think the guy's a goofball, and he kind of bothers me at times because I just think he's kind of, he's funny, but I just think he's kind of in a bad mood most of the time. But Mike Leach at Texas Tech finished in the top 25 5 times in the last 6 years at Texas Tech and won 65% of his games. Then with 2 years of Tommy Tuberville, that gets handed to Cliff Kingsbury, and he can't win like 30% of his games in the Big 12. He keeps going 5-7. I can't imagine that he's going to go to the NFL with that organization and is going to win. I just don't see it, that an organization didn't hire a coach who is heavy enough for the job. My dad used to make that comment all the time when there would be a presidential election. He would say, that guy's not heavy enough for the job, meaning he doesn't have the guts. He doesn't have the will. He doesn't have that mental toughness and that will of steel to get the job done. I just don't see it out of Cliff Kingsbury. But yeah, they're going to take Kyler Murray number 1. And I probably would too. My predictions for Florida State this year: can Taggart turn it around? If 8-4 is turning it around, that's about what my projection will be. So, which reminds me that as soon as I can get through all these spring football games over the next couple weekends, I am going to be ranking the schedules. Every schedule in the Power 5 and the major independents, 68 schedules from 68 all the way up to number 1. And along with those schedule rankings will come my projections for every team's record for 2019. Don't hold me to it as a final prediction because those are coming in August, but that's my projection. And you will never hear projection here like I see in other places where people go, I think they're going to finish somewhere between 7-5 and 10-2. Well, that's not a prediction. That's if you don't hit 90% of those, then you're a moron. If you're not saying, oh, well, I think Michigan State's going to go between 6-6 and 10-2. All right, so 8-4 sounds reasonable for Florida State. That's not my final call, but based on their talent and the improvement that Kendall Briles' offenses show and the drop-off of the offensive production after he leaves, he has certainly made a difference at his last 2 stops. And I expect that to take hold at Florida State as well. Deep Barat. Yes, Cliff is a playboy. Yes, he is. Greg Bush, has Utah played the same level of competition? I don't think so. As Miami, since joining the Pac-12, they have. Absolutely, they have. SEC dog. There's this continuous reference to Lyle. What am I missing there? Who is that? Lyle would go 7-1 in the ACC. Tennessee was crazy to fire him. Are we talking about Les Miles? Lyles? Gotcha. I thought that might be who you're talking about. All right. Will Washington State be any good this year? Any good? They're going to go 8-4 probably. Can Stanford beat Washington and Oregon in 2019? If Kendall Briles brings a top 10 offense like he has at the past stops, what do you think Florida State's record would be? Well, if he's got a top 10 offense with those athletes on defense, they will lose to Clemson and go 11-1. And at the very worst, they'll slip up against somebody else like they did a couple times against North Carolina and against somebody else. They lost to North Carolina. They lost to Georgia Tech. I'm talking about when they had those really good teams, those final teams under Jimbo Fisher that finished in the top 10, and they stumbled against North Carolina. And Mitch Trubisky, I think, was the quarterback in that game in Tallahassee, where Florida State missed a kick at the wire, lost like 37-35. And then, of course, the crazy missed field goal pickup run back by Georgia Tech. Those are the 2 games that come to mind where Florida State really flubbed up against an inferior team. Although the North Carolina team was pretty talented. Ryan Switzer and Elijah Hood and company. So if they've got a top 10 offense, they'll go 10-2 minimum. All right, everyone. I will draw your attention to the set here. We have 16 helmets here. They are listed in the community section of the first page of the channel. And I asked for you to make your selections on what helmet that you would like to see added. I'm going to purchase 2 after I count the vote totals on April 15th, which is only a couple days away, and I've got a call coming in. I think you guys sense when I'm going to shut things down. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do we have on the line?
What's up, Mark?
Hey, DeAndre, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm out here working. I'm taking a little break. I was catching your show, so I said, let me call Mark and see what he's talking about tonight. And I heard you talk about Florida State and Carolina. I think Carolina beat them on the last-second field goal.
Yes.
Georgia Tech blocked the field goal, right?
Yes, absolutely. 2015 and 16. I just went on a tirade about Miami for about 10 minutes and didn't shut up.
Oh, Miami, yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I listen to Zoe. I try to be supportive of Zoe and a couple other guys. Tennessee Roadshow, and of course, Pisky and Pete, and who's the other guy? Bobby Dorkin, great guy. But he doesn't have to do as many live chats. But I bring up this point. Everybody's high on Miami. But this is from what I hear. I've never been to the University of Miami. I don't know nothing about the school outside. They won 5 national championships. But I heard their facilities are terrible. I just don't. Everybody keeps saying they're gonna rise back up, but I don't think it's the same type of time like it was in the 80s and 90s and that 2001 team. I just don't see it from what I hear about the facilities. I hear they have a fair weather fan base down there. I mean, there's so much more to do to go to a football game.
Well, a few things are working against them. They're a private school, correct?
Right.
They're also, they don't have a campus stadium. Therefore, that's always going to be difficult, even if you've got a rabid fan base. If they've got to travel to get to games, like when they were playing at the Orange Bowl, I don't know the distances, but I've heard that it was quite the task for a college student to get to the Orange Bowl rather than the game's just on campus. We walk down the street, we go to the game. So that has to be taken into consideration.
Right. So, I didn't hear what you said about Miami because I think I was doing something else. But what happened with Miami, though?
Oh, just somebody had mentioned to me and asked if Miami was elite and what they would have to do to be elite. And there was comments going back and forth about Miami's elite or they're not elite. And I went on a tirade to basically explain how Miami is not elite. They're not even close to being elite. They've done nothing since 2003 to be elite.
Right.
They're not elite.
Well,
they're Utah.
I think they're just like Michigan.
No. They haven't played as well as Michigan has the last 15 years. It's not even close. Michigan's been better than Miami.
I agree with you, but what I'm saying is people are expecting them to come back, and maybe it's just not going to happen. I mean, there's a lot of factors. The reason why Michigan was real good, social factors, and a lot of other factors why Michigan was really good at one point in time in our history. So and it's like Notre Dame. I know people say, well, Notre Dame finished 15 and 14-0 in the regular season before they played Clemson 13-0. Some of those programs are not going to be what they once were. Even in the 80s, Notre Dame only had 5 good years under Lou Holtz, and then the rest of them were pretty.
He had a pretty good run. He had a pretty good run, DeAndre. And I know you know your football from the 80s and 90s. If you think about it, when Jerry Faust left Notre Dame, they were very marginal. He lost his last game at Notre Dame at Miami, coincidentally, like 56-7. And then Lou Holtz took over and immediately took a 5-win team to the Cotton Bowl. So he turned them around very quickly, and that was the year Tim Brown won the Heisman. And then his second year, he won the national championship. And then his third year, the only game they lost was to a Miami team that won the national championship, and they won the Orange Bowl and finished in the top 3 in the nation. And in 1990, they were again just as good. So from about 88 to 93, that 93 team, those teams in 92, 93, 94, he won the Sugar Bowl. He won 2 Cotton Bowls. They all finished in the top 5 in the nation. Then they started to fall off a little bit, but they were still going 8-3, 9-2 after that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just saying, sometimes there might be other reasons why. I mean, Clemson, Tennessee's pumping a whole lot of money into their facilities. I'm just hearing that Miami doesn't have the facilities that some of these other schools are having. LSU, I mean, I'm just hearing that, you know, their facilities are not there. And everybody keeps saying, oh, they're going to be back. They're going to be back. I'm just like, well, I could see it, but then I can't see it because, I mean, when Segerberger and Jimmy Johnson went down there, they did a good job of keeping those kids at home. And now a lot of those kids are, you know, are going to other schools. And then you got Central Florida and Southern Florida down there, and Florida International, Florida Atlantic that are getting a lot of people that be second team. You remember the joke in the ACC in the 90s when Florida State, their second team, will finish second in the ACC back in the day? I mean, you'll never see teams like that again in Florida because their teams that's coming in there, getting talent out of there, and then you got so many other schools there now. I mean, so it's kind of hard for them to do that. You know, I just think some of them are irrational. I know Florida State had a run with Jameis Winston where they were really good, but I mean, I just don't see those Florida schools replicating what you saw them do in the 90s and the 80s.
No, it's a good point.
Is Miami elite? Yeah, I think they're pretty good, but I don't think they're any better. We had to struggle to beat Duke with what was it? Jake tossed us for a touchdown just to beat Duke, and you still probably shouldn't have won the game 2 or 3 years ago.
They didn't beat
you how far Miami has fallen.
They didn't beat Duke last year. They lost to Duke.
Well, no, I'm talking about the one.
I know, but they couldn't even beat them last year.
Right. So it is hard for me to see them being back, but there's a lot of. I guess we all optimistic, but it is hard for me to see they'll be back. And what made Miami and Florida State so great compared to what Clemson was in the 80s and 90s is that you saw Florida State and Miami on TV every weekend. They went and played Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, both of those schools. Now everybody's on TV, so you don't have to go to. I don't have to go to Miami to be on TV all week. I can go to Clemson. I can go to Central Florida, South Florida, East Carolina. When I was there, used to get a lot of guys out of Miami. So sometimes I think that, you know, we live in this dream world, like everybody's coming back. I know it takes its turns and, you know, cycles. Like Clemson was good in the 80s. I don't remember when Maryland was pretty good for a 3-year stretch in the 80s.
Sure they were.
You know, these teams stay turns. So
Maryland was good up until about 2000, 2001 with Ralph Friedgen. They went to, you know, some really good bowl games. But, yeah, going back to the mid-'80s with Boomer Esiason.
Right. So I'm just saying, I just think it just takes cycles, especially now that you don't have to be at one of these major programs to be on TV all the time. So I just don't. I think that's a lot of it too. So
I got you.
Is Miami elite? Is Miami elite? I think the name is out there. ESPN pumps them up, and that's another thing that made Miami and Florida State so good. They just like Michael Jordan. Hey, they was on TV when the cable TV explosion happened. So when you play these major games and you're willing to go anywhere to play anybody, and you was on TV all the time, yeah, everybody say, hey, I want to go to Miami. They play everybody. They play in Michigan. They on TV on ESPN playing Florida State. You know, they was always doing that. So, Oklahoma, I mean, everybody talks about that year, 2007, 2008,
I believe I could be corrected by somebody out there that, and I remember scores. I believe it was 27-14 that they beat Oklahoma in Norman.
Oh, I thought it was a bigger blowout than that one.
Well, we'll look it up here. Keep going.
Yeah, but as far as Miami being elite, I just enjoy it. I can't wait for the season to start. But you know, we always talk about the Big Ten and the southern part of the state. What's up with Oregon and Washington and Stanford? I mean, those schools I'll be looking at too. I mean, I'm expecting some big things out of Oregon and Washington this year.
Well, you should. I think that division's pretty good. I think that Washington's got the best roster. They've recruited the best. They've had the best team, and they continue to be the best team. But Oregon obviously has this NFL quarterback in Justin Herbert, and Jacob Eason's going to hold a huge key to Washington because he's a physical upgrade from Jake Browning, but he hasn't done it at that level coming in from Georgia. And Washington State's going to continue to do what they do. It's difficult for them to push past Washington because they don't have that level of athlete. And Stanford is probably going to be better than they've been the last couple of years. They're supposed to be. I believe that they'll be a little bit better. I think all those teams are going to be in the 9-3 range. It's going to be a heck of a race between those four teams.
Right. What about the south part of the Pac-10? Who you looking at over there?
Well, I'm looking at a mess because everybody's bad. Everybody's bad. Now, if you remember me last year, even though Utah had the best and most difficult schedule in the entire conference, I picked them to go to the Pac-12 championship game, which they did, and they have all their key pieces back offensively. I know I haven't completely researched them, but I think Utah is the most solid team. USC has the most rostered talent. But those are the two best teams.
Oh, okay. Well, I just cannot wait to see all of the great teams play each other, man. I just can't wait for college football, man. I get tired of talking about recruiting.
Yeah.
I got to play NCAA football on the old Xbox 360 just to get my fix in. I'm 13-0 right now to beat Alabama 49-0.
Very nice. DeAndre, do you remember what I said the score was in the Miami-Oklahoma game in 1985?
No, 22-14.
27-14.
Oh, okay. So you were right.
I looked it up. I'm looking right at it. 27-14. Miami beat Oklahoma in Norman. 1985.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought it was a bigger blowout than that, but that ain't really a blowout. But I thought Miami won that one a little bit bigger. But like I said, Miami back in the day, you know, I think they went on the road and played, you know, Michigan State when they were pretty good. And the next year went up to Michigan. I mean, they stayed on TV. I mean, they did a good job of selling their market and getting those teams to cut down there. And that's one thing I always could never understand about Michigan. Ohio State does it, but I could never understand why Michigan has never gone on the road to play a good team and non-conference. Now, that's some people say might Notre Dame, but that's still regional. But I think the last time I remember Michigan go on the road to play somebody like that, I think they played Colorado one year, and Colorado was really good. And but you never remember Michigan ever going on the road to play a great team. Cause I know Florida State went up there in '91. I know Miami went up there a few times to play, but you never see Michigan go on the road to play a pretty good team.
Well, they did they did in the 90s a little bit. They went out to Oregon, they went out to Washington, they went out to UCLA. But you're right. They made Florida State come to them, Miami come to them. They played all those Notre Dame teams. So that was one thing that was going on then, was that they were playing Notre Dame every year, so that they weren't going to pick up another huge game typically. To your point about Maryland, DeAndre, that same Miami team in 1985 went to Maryland and only won that game 29-22, and Maryland finished 9-3 that year.
Right.
So Maryland gave them a good game.
Clemson was battling for the ACC championship. I think Clemson was on probation. So I know why Clemson was on probation. Maryland was pretty good. I can't understand why Maryland, with all that talent in the Upper Virginia area and the around the Baltimore area, I just can't understand why they can't get their program together. I reckon for a while before Ralph Features got there, they were terrible, and then and right now, they're kind of struggling in the Big Ten, and they should have more speed and talent than a lot of those. I mean, more speed. I ain't gonna say talent, because they ain't gonna have more talent than Ohio State, but I don't get why Maryland's not doing better.
Yeah, they can't beat Indiana on a regular basis, let alone those other teams.
Right.
They can't beat Michigan State. They lose to Michigan State every year.
Right. Matter of fact, I think that was one. I know they did it because of money, but I think that was a big mistake leaving the ACC to go to the Big Ten. I think it would have the recruiting would have kept being better, but now you got Ohio State and Penn State to play every year, and Michigan. That's a harder test than what they had in the ACC. At least you could beat Wake Forest and Virginia and a couple of those other squads every year, but it's kind of hard. But Mark, I'll keep on listening to the show, man. I give somebody else a chance to call in, man. I'm grateful, keeping me up, and I'm out here working.
Thanks, DeAndre. It's always good to hear from you. All right, sir.
Mark.
Talk to you later. My man DeAndre, Clemson fan, ACC supporter, talking college football, and he takes me back to the 80s and 90s on a regular basis as well. So hopefully you can appreciate that and hang with that for those of you who could care less what happened in the 1980s and 90s. I believe we are good to go. I have taken notes on Indiana. I've got Nebraska and Alabama and Auburn and all sorts of teams on DVR. I churned out the Michigan State analysis. I hope you're able to catch that. Penn State, I'm working on that as well here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So one way that you can help us is to go to the description section of any of the videos, And if you do Amazon shopping, you shop at Amazon like a zillion people do, just grab that link and enter the site using that link that clearly says at the top of the description section, under the video, any video, Amazon link, grab it, use it, and that helps support the channel. We appreciate that. If you would like to be on the distribution list for the newsletter, please send your email to mine. Send your email address to MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. I will not clutter up your inbox. Anybody on the live chat or elsewhere who subscribes to the newsletter can tell you that I don't clutter up your inbox. If anything, I haven't delivered a newsletter, unfortunately, for a few months, but we were consistent every week during the college football season from week 1 through the championship game, and I will get back on that. I won't even begin to tell you all the teams that we've covered in the last week concerning spring football, but tomorrow I'm going to have Missouri, Alabama, Auburn, and Ohio State at the minimum, and probably some other teams as well. Help support us on Patreon. It's been suggested and it's been advised to me by many people that you don't point out how much it costs over there, that's not a good selling point, that you just say, hey, we're doing all this great stuff at Patreon. Please join us there. It's just going to be great. But I'm going to lay it out for everybody because I just respect you more than that, and I trust you. So $5 a month. There you go. Consider it this way. This is just me. I'm just making a suggestion to consider it this way, that you get all this content, which, for example, in January was 156 videos, from myself with my analysis and the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry, and probably about 10 or 12 live streams during the month. 156 videos, $5 help support the channel so I can do this at some point full time. I'm going to go shopping tonight or tomorrow, and we're going to buy a camera and a microphone and upgrade from that standpoint. These are the helmets we have. Listen up. Texas, USC, Florida, Oklahoma, marginal, not elite, Miami, Ohio State, Alabama, Florida State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Washington, LSU, Ole Miss Rebels, Clemson, Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Kent State. Okay, those are my 16 helmets. I will purchase 2 more after April 15th. You let me know. Anybody who has voted for any helmets in the live chat, please send your comments to the comment section of any video. I will not see what's in the live chat. So we've got a number of votes. I don't know where the voting stands right now, but I'm going to purchase at least 2 helmets. Definitely the 2 with the most votes will be placed up here. All right. I'm thinking about framing classic Sports Illustrated college football covers. There's Michigan beating Ohio State in 2003. There's Keyshawn Johnson taking USC to the Rose Bowl in 1985. Here we have Northwestern and Darnell Autry. We have Oklahoma and Jason White from 2003. We have Todd Blackledge and Penn State when they won the national championship in 1982. This is a win at home against Nebraska. That was a great series, Nebraska, Penn State. And Penn State played Alabama a number of times in the 80s. There's Marcus Dupree. Here we've got Mike Rozier back in the day. Okay, so I've got a ton more. And my thought is to take these and frame them. Bam! And throw them up there. All right, folks. I've done all I can do. I appreciate the comments in the live chat. If there's anything that you commented to in the live chat that I missed and you would like me to respond to, please leave it in the comment section, and I will do a comments video here coming up very soon. All right. Now I've got to put all the helmets back up there. They're laying all over the floor. Here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, thanks so much for the support. Amazon link. Remember to like the videos. Remember to share these videos on social media with all your acquaintances out there and your family and friends who love college football, because this is what we do all the time. And I appreciate your support more than you know. We will see you guys soon. Miami fans, hang with me. Just I know you took a little bit of a beating, but it's okay. I'm just going through the facts. I'm just being neutral. Yes, you've got a great football program in regards to all-time history, 1983 to 2002. Great, legendary, tremendous. Nothing and hardly anything since then. A lot of bowl losses, a lot of 5-loss teams. Okay, you've got the recruiting background and the talent in your backyard to win. So just do it. Trust in Manny Diaz. Maybe he's the guy to get it done. We will see you soon.